ਮੇਰਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਰੇਡੀਓ USA ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਰੇਡੀਓ USA ਸੁਣੀ ਰੱਖੋ ਤੇ ਮौज ਬਣਾਓ
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਇੱਕ ਸੋਚ ਕਮਲ ਗਿੱਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੇ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਰਿਕੀ ਗਿੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ US ਕਾਂਗਰਸ 9th ਡਿਸਟ੍ਰਿਕਟ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਰਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਰਿਕੀ ਗਿੱਲ ਟੂ ਇੱਕ ਸੋਚ
Hey, Kamal, great to be on.
Yes, Ricky, what are you representing in the Congress?
Right. Well, Kamal.
I mean, not yet, but I mean, you're hoping to represent.
Well, I like the way you're projecting and forecasting the future, Kamal.
I'm confident.
Well, I appreciate the invite again. I'm running for Congress in California's 9th district, and we were discussing this off air. All the districts in California and around the country change shape and configuration. This is an entirely new district. And there's so much here that I think has gone wrong and is problematic. In the congressional district where I'm running, there's double the national unemployment rate. There's huge hardship. And yet when I announced my campaign, Kamal, in this new district, which is centered on Stockton, California, in the Central Valley, there wasn't a single state or federal representative who lived in this entire district. I mean, there was such a huge vacuum of leadership.
Right.
And we're here to restore local representation and give people a voice in the process.
That's great. Okay, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to be interested in politics.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I think everybody has formative experiences. One of them for me was, and I'm a young guy, admittedly now, Kamal, when I win this race, I'd be the youngest member of the entire United States Congress. So if you think I'm young now, I was really young 7 years ago, and I was appointed by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to the California State Board of Education. It was a tremendous honor, and I fought for the California high school exit exam, which we still have as a standard in California. I think that was one experience that mattered a lot to me, and just being in this community, I think we've seen all the travesties and the things that have gone wrong. I would point to something else, though, which is my father, who's a physician here and a farmer, also in the Central Valley, like my mother. He actually grew up in Uganda. He grew up in East Africa. And as many of your listeners will know, for the Asian community in Uganda, it was a terribly devastating experience when Idi Amin came to power in the 70s. And for my grandfather, it was a very searing time. And I think on my father's side of the family, there was an acknowledgement that if you don't get involved in the public process, there's kind of a lot at stake, and you can lose a lot.
Right.
And so that was always something in the background, and I suspect that was a factor, too.
Right. Well, are there any other members in your family that have gone into politics, or you're the first?
No, I don't think any are as foolhardy as I am. But there are plenty of doctors and farmers and business owners too. And I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about some other family members. But they have accomplished a lot in one generation.
Sure. Well, as you know, I have my brother with me, Chenny Pengali, and we're sharing, asking you questions. So he has another question for you.
Great.
Wonderful. Ricky, I understand you're pursuing a law degree, or do you have it already?
It's about 10 days away from being conferred, essentially done.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. So you're combining public service with a legal practice, possibly your legal expertise. What exactly is your mission, your personal mission, and how does what you're about to do dovetail into that?
Well, great question. I mean, I think everyone in this country, I think, is entitled to some semblance of representation. As you know, as I outlined earlier, none of that exists in this current district. In fact, to date, my opponent, who's currently been in Congress for 5 or 6 years, he still doesn't live in this district. He lives in the Bay Area, 50, 60 miles outside of this seat. So restoring representation is vitally important. It's the critical quality of this campaign. In terms of my mission and my priorities, I would say they're probably threefold. One is empowering entrepreneurs and small business owners and farmers. My opponent has an F rating from the American Farm Bureau, and Chunny, this is an agricultural rural district. It's because he's so beholden to special interests. He's selling out the one economy we need to preserve here, which is agriculture. So defending the farmer and the entrepreneur is very important, and that's regulations, that's trade, all sorts of policies. I want to be an advocate, not a foe. He's been unhelpful. The second thing is education reform. Johnny, I was on the State Board of Education, particularly for our community. Education's important. It's a path forward. It's a way of achieving progress. And we have a high school dropout crisis in the city of Stockton. I want to address this in a very forthcoming way. And the last is transparency in government. I'm talking about cleaner, smarter, smaller government. I shared the stage with the former governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, and this is something Governor Bush is tackling, and it's something that I'm advocating, whether it's a balanced budget amendment at the federal level or also a single subject rule, so every bill in Congress only applies to one subject. These are ideas most Americans can rally around, and I'm advocating for them.
Excellent.
Excellent. Also, just totally away from this, is there a person that of Indian origin that probably lives in U.S. that you admire?
Well, there absolutely is. In fact, it's probably tough to cabin my answer to just one person. But if I had to, I would talk. Actually, I would pick two. I'd pick two trailblazers in their own right: my paternal and my maternal grandfathers. I'll talk about my nonna first. He's 98 years of age, and he is one of the biggest pistachio growers in California. He immigrated here decades ago, but never made an excuse, and is still to this day working his heart out in Delano, California, 7 days a week. And I think he really doesn't know the concept of rest. So when I'm in my mid-20s and a campaign is tough, it's very easy to derive inspiration from someone like him. The second person is my grandfather on my father's side. He is a little younger than my nonna, but also skipped around from India to Uganda and really took his family on an interesting journey, which I'm proud to call part of my story, too. He was an entrepreneur and worked in the lumber business in East Africa, and is just a very well-educated, soft-spoken, cerebral person, and another inspiration of mine.
Well, just in terms of getting to know you before we dig into politics, who are some of your favorite authors?
Well, I was thinking about that earlier, and there are a couple of books that I would point out, some of which are written by authors that I wouldn't necessarily agree with politically, but I think they're skilled. They're skilled with the English language. One of them is Evan Thomas. He's more on the left end of the spectrum, and obviously I'm more conservative. But he wrote a terrific book called The Man to See. And I know this is a very esoteric reference, but it was a book about an attorney named Edward Bennett Williams, who didn't come from much. He did not come from a background or a beginning that you would think would foretell great success, but that's exactly what he became. He was a guy who was considered to be director of CIA, I think. He ended up becoming a very successful lawyer. He was, I think, a part owner of the Baltimore Orioles baseball team, and just get a sense for the possibility of America in this book. In Edward Bennett Williams' life, he became so much more than anybody could have anticipated. And I think I see part of that story in my own family, coming from humble origins and fighting with that immigrant mentality and persevering. And I'd like to think we're importing that same quality in this campaign. That's one book that comes to mind. I'm very keen on nonfiction, so I read a lot of biographies, and that was one I recently finished up.
Talking about getting to know you, and our listeners can get to know you better and decide, are you representing them and whatever. So on that line of questioning, what does it mean to you being Indian American? And also, does this ethnic background, do you think it's a plus for you, or is it a hindrance for you?
Well, I think the Indian American community, and particularly being a member of it, is something that informs my understanding of so much in life. I think the values of hard work, diligence, persistence, those are values that a lot of people in this community share, and I carry with them everywhere I go. So, I think in my own family we've affirmed the importance of that. It's also more generally just the immigrant story of coming to this country and fighting for things that are important to you. So I would like to think that as part of this campaign, it's a fight nonetheless, and that forms part of the picture here. And in terms of this actual campaign, I think it's a plus, and there's probably no two ways about it. In a district like this, the Republican Party has often struggled to articulate the importance of its positions in ethnic communities. And so when we go on offense and talk about charter schools and choice in public education, when we talk about protecting the entrepreneur from unnecessary regulations, and when we talked about tort reform for physicians or private property rights, balancing the budget, if you aren't effective as a messenger, the message is probably going to wither on the vine. And so having that background allows me to go places where the Republican Party typically doesn't go. And I think that makes me a more effective candidate.
Right. Are you looking at following the two governors that of Indian origin are there? Is that something finally a route?
I've got my hands full with this campaign, and in this particular race, there's so much that's up for grabs. In this community, we've got a choice.
Right.
Do we want a congressman from the San Francisco Bay Area, or do we want someone from the Central Valley whose heart, allegiance, and everything that's important is here and grounded here? And this is going to be a very closely contested House race. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell your listeners.
Right.
The National Republican Congressional Committee has targeted this campaign. In fact, the chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee was just on Fox News Channel a week or two ago. He mentioned this race in particular as one to watch. So we're in the throes of a real great struggle, and I think we're going to prevail.
Good. Okay. And Chani, you have a question?
Sure. Ricky, I'm interested in the three issues that you raised.
Yeah.
Let's talk about farmers and entrepreneurs. What can a person like you really do at the local level? Isn't that all determined at the national level?
Well, as you know, running for Congress is a seat in the federal legislature, and so on those particular items, here's what I would push for. For farmers, it's more foreign market access. My opponent, Jerry McNerney, voted against 3 trade agreements last year: South Korea, Colombia, Panama. That's a vote that hurts farmers. Farmers want to export their products around the world, and as a member of Congress, I'd fight for more trade and fewer regulatory burdens on farmers. I think when a farmer is so busy complying with rules and regulations, it distracts them from making great produce, and we're talking about that here. In terms of the entrepreneur, it's, again, wiping away the extraneous, frivolous regulation that gets in the way, and making sure the bureaucracy is passing rules that are consistent with economic growth. It has to be grounded in common sense. I think a congressman can advocate on that front. In terms of education, which we spoke about, I want to welcome charter school philanthropy here. The thing that I've noticed in this district and throughout the Central Valley is we don't have the level of charter school startup activity that they have in the Bay Area or they have in Los Angeles. And if we had a member of Congress who actually lived here and was vocal on this issue, more charter school philanthropy would come here. We could allow parents to really mobilize choice in public education, and that's something that all communities, including the Indian American community, can really engage with, which is a parent should really have a high level of influence in their child's education. So I think a member of Congress can make an impact formally, but also informally by just stepping on the platform of leadership and making a difference.
Thank you. Very good.
Very good. Another question. As you know, the U.S. has the lowest rates amongst the industrialized nations of participating in voting. Even in Australia, and some other countries have better participation, almost up to 90%. U.S. is typically, at 60 or sometimes has been less. Does that concern you?
Well, I'd like to see participation rates go up, but I'd like to see them go up as a function of genuine interest and engagement in political campaigns. And I think, it's going to be campaigns like mine, which are organic, which are really on the ground floor here, that I think will draw people out of the woodwork. We're seeing it in our campaign. Very regularly in our office, we get a lot of walk-ins, meaning people who come in unannounced and say, I've heard about this campaign, and there's something interesting that's brewing here. I want to get involved in Ricky's effort. It's very humbling to see. So I think the votes that are going to be cast for me in this campaign will be cast in an affirmative way. It won't be someone passively saying, this choice is the lesser of two evils. I think it'll be someone saying, I actually am ready for a new generation of leadership. And when you have that current of excitement running through a campaign, it's very positive. You bring people out, they're registering simply to vote for you, and we've seen many episodes of that here. This area, particularly Stockton, has been stepped over in the national media. People look at it as a point of pride to finally get someone elected who's from here, because at the end of the day, as Chunny said, the great debates are happening in Washington, and the people of this district deserve some level of legitimate input, and it's not going to happen with a Bay Area congressman.
Yeah, good. I mean, how can we motivate our youngsters about our civic duty? What is it that we can do?
Well, in our campaign, I think, just for your listeners' sake, if they don't know, and many might not, I'm in my mid-20s. And so the sort of younger constituency isn't always keen on the Republican Party, given the certain stereotypes that have been brought about upon us. But in our campaign, they're coming out of the woodwork for us, and there's something that you can do as a function of being a young person, which is motivate and mobilize young people to look at themselves in the mirror and say, I can make a difference too. Mm-hmm. And we're doing that here. A lot of young people here in this community, in San Joaquin County in particular, I think they feel disengaged. That's why there's a high school dropout crisis. And for them to be able to see someone like myself, who's born and raised here, possibly go to Washington and have an impact at the federal level, I think is going to give them hopefully a shot in the arm that they can do this too, that they can do anything they set their sights on, and there's a signaling effect to success.
Right.
And if my success produces that effect, I'd be very humbled by it.
Right. That's the beauty of this country. Sky's the limit. You can do whatever you choose, and if you have the stamina, you can do anything. Right.
Sure.
Right. Jenny, what about your question?
Yeah. Ricky, in addition to those three issues, I'm thinking that Indian Americans face other issues, one of which is we've been the target of some discrimination in the wake of 9/11, and that keeps resurfacing every 6 months or so. We hear another incident against people wearing turbans. Are you concerned about things like that? Have you been involved at any level in terms of giving voice to those people who feel that they have become victims as a result of what happened 10 years ago, 11 years ago?
Chunny, I'm concerned about all acts of discrimination, and I will tell you that whenever someone has an arbitrary burden that is placed on their shoulders, whether it's by way of a stereotype or a preconception, it's just wrong. And it pains me to see that, still in a country of ours, it might exist, and my hope is that we continue to diminish and marginalize and minimize those numbers of acts of discrimination, because it is inconsistent with the American spirit. But in the particular case of the Indian American community, I think we do need to potentially elevate awareness about what this community stands for and represents. And I think as individuals, this community has been very successful, whether it's as physicians or farmers or business people. I think as a community, there is still this tendency to be isolated and to act as individuals. And I think the success of someone in the public arena can elevate the awareness of what this community stands for. And I think, for example, when we win this race, a lot more people will be aware of our identity and what it means to be who we are.
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਇੱਕ ਸੋਚ ਕਮਲ ਗਿੱਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਰਿਕੀ ਗਿੱਲ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ US ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਦੇ 11th ਡਿਸਟ੍ਰਿਕਟ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਰਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰੀਏ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਤਾਈਏ। So Ricky, as we were talking earlier, we're going to go on a little bit of a lighter note. Did you play any sports or anything while you were in high school or in college?
Well, I played tennis. I was much better then than I am now. Kind of without practice, your skills tend to rust. But, these days I try to pick up a basketball whenever I can. And I think it's important to always have digressions from the rigors of the day-to-day. And, in politics, you got to take the long view. I've got 6.5 more months till this election is finally complete.
Right.
And we obviously have one on June 5th, but the eventual election is November 6th. And
right.
you got to take time outs every now and then.
What other things do you do to relax besides?
Well, I think catching up with friends who might not live in the area is important. And obviously we've got some new technology, such as Skype, that enables you to do that. And I like to catch up on some reading, some leisure reading from time to time. But, I would say actually physical activity is very important. I also, I think to maintain, to reduce your stress, but also to be physically fit. So you can fulfill a couple of different objectives there.
Wonderful, wonderful. And, my program is always about positive thinking.
Yep.
So I want to shoot a question at you. I mean, how do you keep yourself positive?
Well, I think I always remind myself of the tremendous honor that I have, given that so many people are placing their trust and confidence in me. Kamal, this is a congressional district with 700,000 people. Of course, not all of them are registered to vote. Ultimately, I think we have about 220,000 registered voters, and to be able to put yourself out there for their approval is still a tremendous honor. And I think we're going to win this race because we're going to garner more trust in my opponent. Right. But it is a blessing to see, I think, and to witness what my family's been able to do in one generation. When my mother and father immigrated here, they had bounced around. As you know, my father was raised in Africa and then went to school in Europe, and probably never could have imagined the day of seeing his son run for the United States Congress in a competitive district. But I think it shows you the power of positive thinking in their lives. And in my life, there are certainly up and down moments, but taking the long view, it's been a very, very positive trajectory. As I mentioned to you, the former governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, was out here campaigning for me. Someone you mentioned, Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina, was here in November. So to be in this kind of a national race, particularly in your mid-20s in a community you care about, is a tremendous role of responsibility. I'm very honored.
So with having all this around you, how do you stay grounded?
Well, I've got a family and a bunch of friends and actually staff members some of whom you've interacted with on my staff, who enforce humility. And we don't take ourselves too seriously, So I think you also understand that people have extraordinary problems in this district. As I mentioned, double the national unemployment. I have young people who come to me who say, Ricky, I'm not sure I should even stay in high school because I have to help out my father who just lost his job, or I have to supplement my mother's income. These are real problems. People can't find a job. The level of public debt is going through the roof, and we have a mortgage crisis in this district, all sorts of problems. And I think you need to take stock of the fact that people are placing confidence in you, and the process exists to solve these problems. And I've just stepped up to make a sacrifice, but I think it's, in a way, nothing like the sacrifice people are making in their lives here in this district, and we've got to fix that.
Right. Isn't Stockton one of the highest areas with the foreclosures?
Absolutely. It's one of the highest in the country, maybe second only to Las Vegas. I talked about this on Fox News Channel. There's just a vicious cycle that has developed here, from foreclosures to then so much private indebtedness that people aren't spending like they used to, and then the economy has just been in an overall downturn. So we're focusing on reviving our agriculture industry. As you know, my opponent's been bad for farmers. I want to be a friend to them. And then we've got to diversify our economy. But it all gets back to a more talented workforce, and we're insisting on educational improvement in this campaign. I think it all starts at home, and it all continues with a young child's education.
Right. What is the one thing that hit the farmers over the last, let's say, a decade? What is the worst one thing that really hurt them the most?
Well, I would say it's kind of a multi-pronged assault that they've faced here. I think they want to be able to export their products. The difference between my opponent and myself. He doesn't believe in trade. I do. I think they've faced hyper-regulation, the sort of regulation that doesn't take stock of the economic cost upon farmers. And so at the end of the day, they need more advocates in Congress. And I think particularly for our community, the reason agriculture has so much resonance is it's even folks who are professionals and physicians in the Central Valley and engineers from the Punjabi community tend to be farmers too. So it has It has a very strong grip on the imagination, but for this entire district, it is a $2 billion plus annual industry, and it's something I want to protect.
Right. Well, Rick, we're going to ask you one of the last questions, and I'm going to turn the mic to Chenny, and then we'll let you go. I know you have, commitments.
Ricky, I wanted you to know that over the last 3 or 4 years, I have gone to San Joaquin County and spoken at the state EDD offices to people who are out of work to share with them techniques on how to write their resume, to polish, and how to become positive and go about job search. I have received countless letters of gratitude from that, and where people have really found work from that. So I've been doing that as a personal mission, absolutely gratis, for about 6 years now.
Well, that's terrific work. I mean, I think you've definitely then been, you have firsthand accounts as to what's gone wrong here. And, Chunny, I think we need new economic development. We're talking about skilled immigration reform, which might not be a very exotic topic, but we need to bring a new generation of job creators here to the Valley, particularly to San Joaquin County, and rest assured that there would be, frankly, no priority greater than that upon winning this election.
Wonderful. So, in closing, let me wish you the very best, and do call on us if we can help you in any way.
Great, and I would just, Kamal and Chunny, one more time, I'd draw your listeners to rickygill.com, and if they like this message and it resonates with them, I would be humbled to have their support, and they can make an online financial donation there.
Very good, Ricky. And thank you for taking time out, and we wish you all the best and all the success that you wish upon yourself.
I appreciated this opportunity.
And
thank you
so much for giving us your time.
Take care.
ਇਹ ਆ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਰੇਡੀਓ USA ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਰੇਡੀਓ USA ਅਮਰੀਕਾ 'ਚ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼